Hello, everyone. You're listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com, or go to the website forthosewelostpodcast.com and click on the contact button and you can reach me that way as well. In this show, people share their stories of losing a loved one to COVID. Each of these stories is heartbreaking, inspiring, and honest. We are candid about how hard it is to move on from our grief, how we relive the events leading up to our loved one's death, and the difficulties in carrying this loss with us through the political turmoil happening in the world right now and in the face of people who don't believe COVID is real. You may hear things in our stories that make you cry, and you may hear things that make you angry. You might hear us talk about politics or the vaccine, and you may not agree. But I hope you'll keep listening. I hope you'll stay to the end of each episode and realize that each person who openly shares here has experienced deep grief over the loss of a loved one, and that's something we will all experience. We all love someone. We will all lose someone we love, and we will all grieve. These are the stories of those we lost to COVID. Thanks for being here with me. I've got a great show coming up for you today. Today, I'll be talking to Jill in Los Angeles. Jill lost her father near the beginning of the pandemic in April of 2020. He lived in the Chicago area and was hospitalized there. From the moment he went into the hospital in March until the day he passed away, he was on a ventilator. Jill talks about her experiences being so far away and talking to her dad and her family via Facetime while he was in the hospital, just hoping that he could hear her. She also talks about how disconnecting her grief is and how going home was such a strange experience because she expected her dad to just be there and to hear his voice. We recorded this episode on September 22nd, 2021. Jill mentions the COVID Connection support groups. That link is in the show notes below. This is a great episode, and it's full of love, grief, hope, and even laughter. And with that, I'd like to welcome Jill to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I know that your dad passed away in April of 2020. So what I would like to do is go back to pretty much the beginning of the pandemic and just how you and your family found out about COVID, and just start with the pandemic and the beginning of March of 2020 and talk about what happened.
All right. Well, gosh, March of 2020 was crazy for us. I actually started out the year, I'm in LA, and I have two little girls, and I'm and a husband, and I was actually in New York at the beginning of March, and you started to hear the rumblings of COVID when I was there. And because it was starting to increase there, and by weekend's end, it was scary. Like I had gone away my first weekend away ever without without my kids and my husband. And it was just like an exercise, like fitness retreat. And I remember coming home on that Sunday and being scared, scared for what was going to happen, scared to be on the flight, just because the news, it was all you were hearing.
Yeah.
And so I got home, and we knew, we had started to hear the rumblings about school, and my daughters go to a public school through LAUSD. And so the whole following week was just kind of chaos and confusion of like our school shutting down and, all of that. And within a matter of days, I can't remember the actual shutdown date, but I think it was within the week of me coming home. By Friday's end, it was done. School was done. We were in
Mm.
person, back, it wasn't even Zoom. It was just some worksheets, for the kids to do. And my little one was in preschool and her school shut down consistent with the public schools. It was kind of just following the lead. And so, I was still working full time and it was
Wow.
crazy trying to manage 2 kids at home. My husband works full time um and my parents and my 2 sisters live in Chicago. My brother's in Philly, and so we were all kind of talking and like, "This is insane," and like, and
Mm.
I remember my dad reaching out to me right when, like, the stay-at-home orders had gone into effect, and him checking on me and him saying, "How you doing? How's, in-person learning?" And it was just kind of this, funny back and forth of like, "Oh my god, we're losing our mind." And it was like 3 days in. It was like 3 days in, But, that was my dad. He was always checking on me to making, 'cause he knew how hard it was to not have I don't have family here. It's just our little family of 4, and, so we were definitely thrown into kind of a tailspin of that, like, first, shock of everybody's home, but my husband and I have to keep working, and my, 7-year-old at the time had to keep learning and, all that stuff. We weren't so worried about the little one because she
Yeah.
was only 3 at the time. And then, it got even worse because within probably a week later was when my dad started showing symptoms. He, had the fever, a bad cough, and I remember it being like a Tuesday or Wednesday because I called home every day to my parents. Pre-COVID, I would call them while I was on the way to get my girls. And then when I would get the girls, we would then have a funny conversation with, my parents on the way home.
Mhm.
And I kind of tried to keep that up once the pandemic hit. And I remember talking to my mom, I think it was the Tuesday or Wednesday towards the end, March, like 20 something. And I heard my dad cough in the background and she was just like, no, 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 it's nothing. Well, by, Saturday morning at 5 a.m. on March 28th, I get a call and it's my brother to tell me that dad's on the way to the hospital with suspected COVID.
Mm.
And, I don't know if they didn't, I think they hoped it wasn't COVID, my parents, and or they were trying to shelter, protect me given
Yeah.
all that I was dealing with at the time, that they didn't want me to worry. And so that was at like 5 in the morning on that Saturday, and I remember just getting off the phone with my brother and quickly texting my dad. I tried to call him and he didn't pick up, and then I texted him and he did respond. And we had a very brief text exchange, and that was my last conversation because within a few hours of him being admitted into Northwestern Hospital in Chicago, he was put on a ventilator.
Oh.
And yeah, and so he never got, as much as we tried to, and hoped that, we could try different methods for getting him off. It never worked. And 3 weeks later, on April 17th, he passed away.
Mm.
So, for us, it was crazy because it was all at the beginning. It was like the chaos of just generally dealing with such a life-altering experience that COVID was for so many families, and then to have it personally impact you because, your dad is suffering and then ultimately passes away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, that quickly, especially
Yes,
when there was I mean, the news was so all over the place. Was
exactly.
was there even a mask mandate or
No.
even discussion of masks then? Yeah.
No, so when my dad there wasn't when my dad got sick, and then I remember towards the tail end, I remember when he was in the hospital, um, talking to my mom in the mornings and getting, like, the update of how my dad did over the nighttime, and I remember for the most part of him being in the hospital, I was not wearing a mask, and it was only, I wanna say, maybe the 2nd week of April where the mask mandate went into effect here in LA. And until then, no. I mean, I remember not wearing going to get coffee in the morning and my dad being in the hospital and I wasn't wearing a mask here because they were saying, "No, no, no, it doesn't protect you or whatever." And then all of a sudden it changed. And then I
Yeah.
remember having to wear it. And I know, I mean, most certainly that my dad wasn't wearing them in March in Chicago.
Yeah. Was he well, first of all, do you know or suspect how he got COVID?
We think my dad was very, very active in the community and just always out and about. He did the grocery shopping for my mom, but he was also a volunteer judge at the Board of Elections. And in Chicago, there was an election about I want to say a week and a half before he started showing symptoms. And so we suspect that's where he got it only because he was that first point of contact for people. Like when they walk in, he was the person that hands out the iPads and like gets you registered and all set up. And so we think that that's how. The only other option would be just like a grocery store or something like that, which we just don't think is possible. We think just because he wouldn't have had as much contact with somebody under those circumstances. I mean, when he serves on those elections, he's there all day, for 10 hours a day. So we think that that's likely how.
Yeah. And at the time, they probably didn't even have the beginnings of contact tracing to go back.
No,
And yeah.
no, not at
Yeah.
all. Not at all.
And your mom, did she get COVID?
She did not. Thank God.
Oh,
Thank God, because that was the worry for the first, 2 weeks. My brother, who's a vascular surgeon in Philly, when all of the wheels were set in motion, taking my dad to the hospital and he was admitted, he just said to my mom, "Drop him off, get your butt home, and clean that place from top to bottom, and then quarantine." And that's what she did. And so there was just this tremendous amount of worry that she would have it because his coughing was so bad apparently in the days leading up. He ended up having double pneumonia. And so but she I don't, under I don't know how she did not get it, but she did not. And she was even
wow.
she tested for antibodies a few months later just to see, and she wasn't. She
Huh.
didn't have any antibodies. So,
Wow. That
yeah.
it always surprises me to hear that people in the
Mhm.
same household and one gets COVID and the other doesn't, or parents that get it and the kids who help them and then they don't get COVID.
I
Or
know.
even yeah, it's just wild.
She's one of those, they came out with that study where a certain blood types. I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
reading, is it the O positive or whatever the universal, she is that. And I wonder sometimes if that's what helped her, protected
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. So she stayed home for a couple weeks.
Yes.
And your dad was on a ventilator. So was anyone able to go in and be with him?
No, not till
Mm.
the end, not till we knew that he was not going to make it. And so that last day on the 17th, was the only time that my mom got to go see him for a brief time period. And then my middle sister went with her. And they didn't get to go in together. They had to go separately. And my mom described it to me. It was just very weird and awkward because the nurses were all there, and she definitely did not feel that she got to have a proper goodbye with him because of that. It just wasn't what she deserved. So the our only contact with for the rest of us, our only contact was through FaceTime, just talking to my dad because obviously he couldn't talk back to us.
So they had iPads in
They
the
did.
okay.
They did. Not the first. I don't think we had FaceTime for maybe the first week. It was only my mom calling and getting updates or my brother calling. My brother was just critical in just, deciphering all the medical issues and explaining to us in layman terms and all that. And so he would call and talk to the doctors, and then my mom would call, and then we'd have a family FaceTime at night just to report everything.
Yeah.
And then at some point, my mom found out, or maybe my brother asked about FaceTime calls, and the nurses said, "Yes, let me look into it." And then, like I said, I think it was like a week after he was admitted, we were able to start doing like one FaceTime a day with
Yeah.
him. Um,
A
so
and so that but how was that? Was that just the iPad sitting there and you talking to him, just
yeah,
hoping that he could hear you?
yeah, exactly. It was very weird.
Mm,
And it was a lot of us, the nurses were absolutely wonderful. I mean, we would talk to them when they would call us and they would, kind of give us the update of how he was doing. And, we'd laugh and joke with them. And then it was just us talking to my dad or us just talking to each other in the hopes that he could hear us, and we would often joke, like, "God, he's probably listening to us now, like, shut the hell up," because that was my dad. He would just be like, "Oh my god, all this talking," but he never could talk back, so it was just us hoping that he could hear us,
Yeah,
and just feeling close to him, which for me was so hard because I was completely across the country.
yeah.
So I felt so far away from it, so removed from it all, so
So yeah, so disconnected.
exactly.
Do you ever have that feeling like if you just drove up to the house, your house where they lived in Chicago, that he's just gonna be there?
I do. I have moments,
Okay.
and it's because I think it's because I don't live there. I have so many moments where I'm like, I go, "Oh my god, he's gone." Like, and there'll be, like, that moment of, like, I wanna call him, or my little one yesterday did something really just was like, I got an email from school, and it just was something my dad would just find hilarious, and it was that moment of, like, "Ugh, he's gone. I can't
Yeah.
call him. I can't call him." Um, but yeah, I went home for the first time after I got my vaccination. I went home for the anniversary of his 1 year death passing, and it was so weird to walk into the house and like him have not be there, and it was bizarre. But even when I went back the second time for his memorial in June of this year, it was the same thing. It's like, I would have thought that it would go away, and it doesn't. It's you
Mm-mm.
walk in and you still expect them to be there, or you can hear his voice, or you can hear his laugh. It's just so strange.
Yeah, I have to drive by my mom's memory care, to go get my hair cut and
Yeah.
different drives to places, and there's just days where because it happened so remotely for me too, just seeing her on an iPad, that
Mhm.
I could just drive up there and go to the window and say, "Bring my mom out," and that she's
Right.
just still in there somewhere.
Yeah.
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 It's, uh it's difficult. So you were able to have a family memorial. How was that?
It was absolutely beautiful and what he would have wanted. But with that being said, it was a year and a half after he passed. And it's funny, it wasn't any easier. I mean, we all were just messes, and, but, there's something to be said about the tragedy upon tragedy, and I think it's getting lost a lot on people, is that not only did we lose somebody to COVID or just lose somebody, but then we were deprived of all of those things you do when you lose somebody.
Yeah.
And we were in this weird limbo for a year and a half where you didn't properly grieve them because you're barely holding on, trying to survive and have kids do virtual learning and all of the things. And so it's tragedy upon tragedy is how I often say. It's like you're constantly triggered because you didn't get to recover or work through it when they
Mhm.
passed. So I think it's interesting because I often think, like, I think in years to come, when they look back on all the people who have lost somebody, what the impact of that, of not being able to grieve properly and when you needed to. And, yes, I'm grateful that we were finally able to have that, but I feel damage has been done to so many of us who it was stunted on the day they passed, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, because for me, I wanted to go my mom's sisters live nearby, and
Mhm.
I couldn't go see them. I
Right,
couldn't go give them a hug. We couldn't sit and laugh and talk and
right,
tell stories about my mom, and that would have been what happened if
right,
she had passed away under other circumstances. We would have all gotten together. We would have said, she would like this and this, and we would have arranged it at our church, and we would have
right.
been able to have it inside. And we would have laughed and hugged and, oh, all
I
those
know.
things. I think without that, you just don't realize in grief that that is a huge, huge part of the grieving process is that connection that you have with the family, and
Absolutely.
we were all alone. I mean, you were alone,
Absolutely.
you
And I don't care how much FaceTime, I don't care how much a
Mm,
phone call, it doesn't it doesn't make it better.
no.
And that's the thing. And even when my mom was telling me that even when my dad passed away and my brother thankfully was able to, when we knew the end was near, my brother was able to drive in from Philly to be there with my dad in the final, like when he passed. And after he passed, he went to my mom's, but because we were worried my mom could potentially have COVID, we all of those concerns, they couldn't even hug after my dad died. It was this weird, they met each other outside of my mom and dad's place and just talked to each other from a distance in this daze. I mean,
Oh,
can you imagine that?
no.
Like, it's like, and my mom talks about it to this day, and I can't even imagine it, and I'm part of the family, and to not and my mom just is like, I couldn't even hug my son who was with my husband when he passed because we were all so scared that either I had it or he had it or we could give it each other, we could, and it was just this weird no, it just was so bizarre. The whole thing was bizarre, and for me, I remember it being my dad passing on a Friday night, and I remember the whole blur of it all, and then I remember Monday morning having to get up and log my seven-year-old into virtual learning, and it was like, "This is so weird." Like, and then I'm working, and I'm like, "This isn't okay." Like, my beloved dad just died, like, this isn't like this isn't okay. So, I just think there's gonna be a lot of repercussions from that for many of us.
I do
It
too.
may yeah, I just think I feel it now, but I think it's gonna resurface as well in years to come for many of us. The
Mhm.
trauma, the multiple layers of trauma of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I belong to a grief group, and I am the only person in that group who's lost a family member to COVID. And and at times, I mean, we all experience grief. It's grief. You're
Right.
sad, your mother, your father passed away. I I just feel like in the 8 or 9 months I've been a part of this group that I just have so much grief
Yeah.
and they're processing their grief and I feel stuck. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason why I do this because if I feel this stuck with it, there's got
Mhm.
to be so many other people that do too, like you
Exactly.
and we just I mean, it's hard.
I
It
agree. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I feel, I have fine days and I have great days and then there's moments like this past Saturday for no reason I just get up and I just felt crappy. And it's like it's grief. It's just and you can't and you're like I just got to get through cuz tomorrow will hopefully be a better day. But it's like you think that with time it will feel better, and in some respects it does, but then in other respects, it's like just this dull, achy, longing feeling, and, the fact you couldn't have a proper goodbye, and to me, sometimes that feels worse than the acute pain of right after they pass.
yeah.
It's because now the rational side of you knows this is done. Like you can't fix this. This is this is your life. This is you will be dealing with and feeling this way the rest of your life. You just have to figure out how to make it a part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of it might be because it's so present in everything. You walk into
Mhm.
a grocery store, there's social distancing signs, wear
That's
a
right.
mask. It's triggering everywhere.
Mhm.
They talk about COVID on the news. You go
Right.
to well, I went to a movie, which I mean, it was really nice to go to a movie theater, but there
Mhm.
was a commercial before the movie about the vaccine and COVID and all this stuff. So you're constantly reminded.
Right. Right. I got along that lines today, I get an email about um I'm a lawyer, and I got an email about a bar association seminar, and the title was "Moving on from COVID," and I'm
Oh,
like I'm like, "Really?" Like, I mean, I know this is related to my area of law, but really, like,
Yeah,
it's like I can't even get away from it here,
yeah.
you know? Like, there's no safe space. It's
Mhm.
just every day it's part of, and it's funny because you don't like, when someone passes from cancer, you're not triggered every day from you don't see all over the news,
Yeah.
or the politicizing of it or all of those things. And so I think that is just adds to another layer that complicates our grief.
Yeah, the what do they say? The new normal or
Yeah.
going back to
Right.
normal.
Yeah,
Ugh,
and for so many of us, we're not going back.
mm-mm.
We
Yeah,
can't go back.
yeah,
That wasn't a choice for us or an option for us.
right. Right. So you have been through the 1 year anniversary of your father's passing, and
Yes.
I just went through my mom's, gosh, about a month ago. Man,
Yeah.
time just gets lost. I feel like for me, the 4th of July seemed to happen 10 years ago, and
Mhm.
yet my mom passing away seems like it was just yesterday.
Agree.
There's
Yeah.
it's so weird.
It is
Uh,
so weird.
Did you experience the timeline over again, like in March, what was going on and everything building up to when the day your dad passed away?
I did, I felt that heaviness.
Mhm.
What I thought was interesting is the buildup was harder for me than the actual day. But perhaps it was because I made the decision that I'm going home and I'm not going to be by myself without my family on this day. So I chose to fly home to Chicago with just me to spend time with my mom and my 2 sisters. But yes, the days leading up to it, just every day was like, "Oh, yep, dad was in the hospital this day. Oh, that was the day he started showing symptoms." It was like in your head, you were just like remembering it. Oh, yep, 5 a.m. on that Saturday, I got the call when my life changed forever. Yes. And I wonder, will it be that way every year? That's what I was, for it. What was interesting to me is when he right after he passed is every Friday I hated too. Every Friday evening I hated because
Yeah.
because it was so fresh in my mind, the events of the Friday he passed, of the evening of my brother going in, and then you were waiting for the call, and then I got the call, and then I talked to my sister, like, and so that all played out. That went away, but I definitely that the March leading up to his 1 year, oh, and the,
Mhm.
days of April, I played that out of like, oh yeah, I remember that day and what, everything that happened and the symptoms, and then he went to the hospital and my texts with him and never talked to him again.
Yeah. Yeah, I did that too. I hated my mom passed away at 12:30 in the
Mm,
morning on a Monday,
mhm.
and I knew she wasn't doing well. She had rebounded, so we were hopeful, but then all of a sudden she just went back downhill really
Yeah.
quickly.
Mhm.
And I went to sleep and I put my phone there and I turned it up as loud as it could go and I had no do not disturb on and accept
Yeah.
any number that called and
Mhm.
my phone rang at 12:30 in the morning and I just said, I "Oh, no," because I
Yeah.
knew. I mean, I
Yeah.
knew. But I did that too for months. I went
Yeah.
to bed every Sunday night
Yeah.
and I thought, when I woke up Monday morning, oh, it yeah, it's weird. I think like you said, years from now, there's gonna be studies done,
Yep.
and people like psychologists and psychiatrists are gonna be writing books on COVID grief.
Absolutely. Because it's so, I know that everybody grieves differently, from all the many books and articles I've read since my dad passed, because this is really my first experience with grief. But this is just unique on so many different levels, I feel like, and then to have it play out, still, we're still playing it
Yes.
out. How, for those that have lost someone right at the beginning, for me, it's, a year and a half, of living every day.
Mhm.
I'm reminded not only of how that my dad's dead, but that what he died of. And so it's like it's hard because you try and find the positive. I know my dad would want me to find the positive, and I do, and I'm proud of myself for that. But I'm also you every day I get stuck with that. Oh yeah, dad died of COVID. It's on the news,
Mhm.
or So that's really, really difficult
Yeah.
for us all to deal with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, did he so he got COVID pneumonia. Did he have I don't like the comorbidities question, and
mm,
people will always ask like, "Well, what else did your mom have?" Like
yeah,
because she died of COVID, she had to have something else wrong with her. Did
yeah.
your dad have any other health issues that you know of that would have led him to get COVID pneumonia so quickly?
No, he was a healthy 77-year-old.
Hmm.
So, I mean, he was that grandpa who was playing with his 9 grandkids. I mean, literally went indoor skydiving like a month and a half before he passed. He was like
Oh,
total daredevil. And I mean, I mean, as you know, it just ravaged him. I mean,
yeah.
it just took a hold. And what I found really strange about the whole thing was like, and you hear it when you hear other people's stories, is like one day he would be awful. And you're like, it's gonna happen today. He's gonna pass. And then he would just turn a corner. And you're like, I
Mhm.
remember talking to another partner at my office because they would check in on me and I'd say, nope, he's doing fantastic today. I think he's going to get off the ventilator tonight. Like this whole, and then overnight there would be a whole episode and then it would be a total, and then he would back to declining. I have never experienced such a roller coaster
Mhm.
of like it, but it's funny because after he passed, I joined a COVID support group and you heard the same story over and over again. And it was like, oh, like that's how this disease or this virus operates. It was crazy. And even like when the like couple days before he passed, when he took the decline, I think there was still hope in us that
Mhm.
he would round the corner still because it had happened before. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
crazy. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had nothing that we know of.
Wow, so it just it's I don't hear that very often. I've
Yeah,
talked to quite a few people, and most people, as they start talking, are like, "Oh, well, my mom had this, or my dad had this, or he had a heart
yeah,
attack, or whatever." So I mean, it's so interesting how this virus just gets in,
yep,
and in certain people, it is just deadly. I mean, my mom
yeah,
was gone in 12 days from the time she tested positive, and we
mhm,
thought she was gonna make it. At one
yeah,
point, we went to see her
mhm,
well, she was moved from the nursing home she was in. She was in a memory care to a COVID nursing home. So they moved her to a nursing home that was only filled with COVID patients.
okay.
And all it was old. That building was old and had those old wooden windows with the really thick screens, and they
Oh,
weren't
yeah,
paneled. So we couldn't see her very well.
mhm.
But she was sitting up and she had her eyes open. And the only words that she said to me on the speakerphone were, "What happened?"
Oh my gosh.
I tried to explain a little bit like, "Well, you've got a bad flu, mom," because that was just the best way for her to
Mhm,
understand with her Alzheimer's, but then she started to drift off, and I knew she was medicated,
mhm,
but my sister went home the next day because we got a call, we checked in
right,
with them. They were great. "Call us once a day. We'll give you a good update about your mom." And
yeah,
they said, "Well, her oxygen's better. She's eating some food. Her eyes are open. She's, responding. So we think she's on the mend." And my sister and her husband were like, "Okay, she's going to be all right. We're going to go home," because they had been there for a
yeah,
week
yeah.
staying in a hotel. And they weren't home. I don't even think they were home 24 hours.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
got the call that my mom had just totally gone downhill. We
Yeah,
had limited FaceTime because there was a lot of patients in that facility. They
mhm,
did have iPads, but also you felt like you were taking time
mm,
away from other family members. So we had our thing where they put it on the little table. We were
mhm,
able to see her from the side and talk to her, and then they would come check on us, and we would let them go take the iPad somewhere else. But
yeah. Ugh,
and 2 days later, she passed away.
it's just
But she was relatively healthy besides the Alzheimer's.
mhm.
So, yeah, it's just so crazy. It's
I
so
know,
crazy.
I know, and then like, like the underlying condition thing,
Mm,
I hate when I get asked how old he was, like it matters.
you're right.
It's just like, "Screw you, I don't care if
Mhm.
he was old, there was nothing wrong with him, and his life still mattered."
Yeah.
You
Like
know, he still
he
had
had a
he
good long life. Ugh.
exactly.
Mm.
And right, I love that. And it's like, yeah, and he probably had 15 more years at least
Yeah.
left if he had kept up, if he was, because he was so healthy.
Yeah.
And I hate that. It makes me so mad when people ask me how old he was.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom would have been out line dancing on a
Yep.
singles cruise right now if she
Yeah.
didn't have Alzheimer's and was still going. And she was
Yeah.
82, but she
Yeah.
had a lot of,
That's right.
she had a lot going on in her life before she
Mhm.
got Alzheimer's.
Same,
So,
yeah, same with my mom is 73 and my dad was 77, and so they were so active. They were so active together. So, and
wow.
traveling out here to help me and with their grandkids and all that stuff. So, it's just I know he would have lived at
Yeah.
least another decade, I felt. So,
Yeah. So, you mentioned COVID support groups.
mhm.
And is that one of the main things that you're doing to sort of work through your grief and anger? If I mean, I'm still angry. I don't know
Yeah.
if you still feel anger, but is that helping?
So I initially did the COVID support group, and I did it I'm still signed up for it, and I do tune in every now and then. I didn't find it the most helpful though. I did initially. And then I realized a few months ago, you know what? I need individual therapy. I have to work through this because I was having a lot of like, why wasn't I there? Why didn't I get a proper goodbye? That stuff that I'm having to work through. Um, I'm not so I'm not so angry, but I guess I'm not here's my take on it. I'm not angry about what I like myself, and I guess that's because I had so many wonderful years with my father, and I have so many great memories that I can smile at and laugh at, and I can
Mhm.
literally hear his voice as we talk or hear his laugh, and I'm so grateful for that because you see on the news these young people and even young kids who have lost their parents, and I'm like, "That is just truly,
It
truly
is.
heartbreaking."
Yeah.
But for me, what gets me angry and what just hurts me and just literally is a gut punch when I think about it is what my children have lost and what the grandkids have lost. Especially I'm the one of my siblings who have the youngest, kids, and my little one is just such a free spirit, so funny, and my dad just always just loved, engaging with her because he just found her hilarious and great personality and just so cute. I I'm sad because I know she won't remember him, and she deserved that, and he deserved that. And, even though everyone's like, she'll remember it through stories, it's not enough. And, I want her to remember him because she remembers him. So that's hard. And like, as I tear up,
Mhm.
that's what gets me at night is, when my little one, Vera, just started playing soccer and it was so funny on Saturday. And my dad would be the one that I would call to tell about that or FaceTime about that. And so it's like, those are the things that just destroy
Yeah.
me inside. I can get myself through my pain for what I have lost, but really hurts when I think about the grandkids and in particular my daughters. So,
Yeah. Have you encountered anybody? I know you live in Los Angeles, and that's definitely one of the places like Oregon that was closed down
uh-huh.
the longest. But then also, as soon as there was a little bit of breathing room for like going out to restaurants or doing anything, then there was mask mandates again.
Right.
Do you encounter anybody who says to you, "COVID isn't real," and how do you answer that?
I have not, but like you said, I live in I live in West LA. And so I have to say I live in my little bubble where people have taken it serious. And thank God, because God help me if I had to deal with that too. I don't know how people are dealing with that while also grieving the death of a loved one,
Mhm.
because of COVID. I don't know how I would do that. I mean, it's another trigger. I have been fortunate because everybody that I know and have come into contact, everybody's super safe, super respectful. Even my daughters are all wearing masks at school, and everybody, all the parents, respect that when they come on to pick up the children and all of that. So I haven't encountered any of that. Have you?
Well, my own dad for a long time and my stepmom both think that it is political
Mm,
and that it's just a flu and that they don't really believe COVID is real.
oh gosh.
So, yes, I encounter it. And then when my mom got sick and I told my dad cuz I talked to him especially with my mom having Alzheimer's, I would call my dad quite a lot just to hear stories of my mom.
Hmm.
And after she passed away, I'm sure that they still think the same thing,
Hmm.
but they don't talk to me about it anymore.
Right.
And if they do really start to get going, my stepmom in particular, on any kind of a political rant, she will realize that she's treading on thin ice with me, and then she'll change the subject.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's a tough one because there's even well, and I haven't really talked to my sister about a lot of this in a long time because you families grieve in different ways.
That's right.
And
That's
my
right.
sister believes that my mom just took the COVID and gave up, that she just gave
Mm,
up.
okay.
And and I know my mom didn't want to have Alzheimer's, and I know there were days where she said she was ready to go, but she
Hmm.
was also such a fighter
Hmm.
that I just can't get behind that.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, I'm one of those people that I will talk about my mom, and I'll tell anybody my mom died of COVID just
Yeah.
because it's just this thing right
Right.
now. Hello, my name is Jennifer. My mom died of COVID.
Right. Or you just love when people ask you.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the last time I had been asked about my dad, and I was at a birthday party for one of my daughter's friends over the weekend, and someone who I don't usually talk to and hadn't seen in a while beeline to me and said, "How's your mom doing?" And it was just like I wanted to say to her, I of course said thank you and talked, and I wanted to, after I was leaving, I was like, I should have pulled her aside and said, "You don't know how much that meant to me."
Yeah.
Because people don't wanna talk, a lot of people don't
Mhm.
wanna talk about it because it makes them uncomfortable, and just for you to ask in an indirect way about my dad, that meant enough.
Yeah.
And it's people ask in those initial stage, in the initial stage, and then they just want you to move on.
Yeah.
And because it makes them comfortable, it'll make them comfortable. It doesn't matter about what you're dealing with inside.
Yeah. Do
And
you do you find that, you're more able to be there for other people in their grief or their hard times now that you've been through something like this?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Do you feel that way? I feel
I do.
definitely that way. I mean, I've always been a pretty empathetic person, but no, I come from a totally different angle
Mhm.
now. I'm like, whoa, like this is forever changed me, obviously. I like to describe it that, and actually one of my clients told me this after my dad passed away. He's like, when you first lose when you lose one of your parents, it's like you realize you're an adult now. Like you're in this,
Mhm.
and that's exactly how I feel. Like, gosh, life can change in an instant, and
Yeah,
we have to be kind to each other and more respectful of each other, and don't take things, for granted. But I'm happy, but I have to say with my dad, I'm happy I never did. And I'm glad that in his passing that I don't have that grief of regret. I have
yeah,
not a single regret of him. And that's sort of what I'm working through in my therapy, because my therapist has said to me, "Jill, even if you were given the chance to talk to him and he could talk back, what more would you have said?"
mhm,
And it's true, because I knew he loved me and I loved him. And there's a and I know I made him proud and he was a wonderful father. So it's like, it's funny, but it's like but you're like, I still am like, but I still needed it.
mhm.
I still
Yeah,
deserve that. Even though I know all those things, I still needed to see him and him talk to me. And I think it's just a father talking to his daughter saying, "You're going to be okay."
yeah. Yeah,
So
it's never enough time, no
it's
matter
not.
no matter how much I have zero regrets with my mom. It was
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
The last 6 years of my life with her and taking on as much as I did was so hard,
Yeah.
but I have 0 regrets, and
Right.
I know that wherever she is now, her soul, she's got her memories back, and she knows,
Right.
and that's just how I feel. I also feel like I have friends going through very hard things,
Mhm.
like cancer during COVID times, and where
Mhm.
I would have shied away from talking to them or calling them because I would feel like I don't know what to say. Now
Absolutely.
I just do it anyway because I feel like it
Right.
doesn't matter what I say to them. It only matters that I'm keeping in touch with them and that they feel not forgotten and that they can talk and I can listen.
That's absolutely true, and that just reminded me, I have a friend who like an acquaintance of a friend who from the gym, and she lost her son to cancer, a little
Mm,
8-year-old, same age as my oldest, gosh, probably a month ago, and I never I probably would under if I had not lost my dad, I would have shied away because I wouldn't have known what to say. I
mhm.
wouldn't, and even though I don't understand her grief, because I don't understand what it's like to lose a child, I knew what to say, and I knew what not to say. I
Yep.
knew, you know what I mean? That
Mhm.
not to say he's in a better place or all that other crap people say that just makes you no, like
Yeah.
he's
Time
not in a
will
better
heal.
yeah, he's
Oh,
not in a better place because a better place is here.
right. Right. People tell me that too with my mom. She's in her place, a better
Yeah,
place. Right. But
right.
I wish she was still here
Exactly.
so that when the doors to her memory care opened, I
Right,
could have run in and given her
right.
a huge hug, even if she had no idea who I was.
Exactly, or it's what he would want. Well, I don't give a shit what he would want. He's not here. I always love that
Right.
one because he doesn't have he doesn't have a say because he's not here.
Yeah.
It's just like so, I mean, I love that I now know the things to say and not to say and just to be there for somebody. Sometimes it just takes, and so I reached out to her and I know me and I never would have done that had I not
Yeah.
lost my dad because I wouldn't have known what to say. And I would have been so just scared. And so I just let her know I was here for her and sending her positive vibes and all of that. And, thankfully I knew that I could do that. That it was okay to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Have you have you submitted your name or done any participated in any of the memorials? I know that there's traveling memorials, the Yellow Heart memorials. There were a number of them in California, and then there's the beach memorial. There's also the white flags right now that
I
are out.
did, yes,
Oh, good.
I did
Tell
the
me
white
about that.
flag, yes, my mom actually submitted a little bio, so, like, if you do the search for my dad's name, it comes up,
Oh,
and I did it, and I'd give anything to be there to see it.
me too.
My cousin lives in DC, and she said she's going this week, so I'm hoping that she can find it. I think it's set up so you can actually find him on the map, and so she's gonna go and do a video, but, have you seen those, like, the aerial photos? I
I
mean, it's
have.
just
Staggering.
I think that's why I was in a funk on Saturday because I had looked at it on Friday, and I just think it set me into a, like, "Oh my god," the
Yeah.
gravity of it and
Yeah.
just and then you see the pictures of people who are there, and you're like, "Did they lose someone? Are they there just, just to pay respects?" I mean, you see the pain in so many of those people's faces. God, it just that one in particular, though, I just found it's just, heart-wrenching, but
Mhm.
yet beautiful at the same time.
It is. It's 660 some thousand white
Yeah.
flags sitting out there, and it is like staggering
Yeah.
to look at it and think that each one of those is a person
Yep.
who died from COVID just in the United States.
I know. It
And it blows my mind. I submitted my mom's name in a little message, and then I did the
mm,
bio for
yeah.
her too, which I had her name sent into the Rami's Heart, which is the hearts in New Jersey on the beach. And
Oh, okay.
so they put little rocks out with people's names on them. And there was so
Oh.
many hearts eventually. And with summertime and the waves, they needed to move them. So they
Mhm.
picked them up, put them in shadow boxes, and it's part of the first national memorial that is in one
Oh.
physical location.
Oh my
So
gosh. That's amazing.
yeah. Yeah, I just there's so many different things to do. I just for a while it was hard for me.
Yes,
Because
yes,
I didn't want it to be real. I felt like, oh, if I send her name in, then it's real.
right. Right. Yeah, exactly. But then you get to a point, at least that's where I am, where I don't want him forgotten. I don't want
Mhm.
all of these, not, not just him, but everybody who's lost somebody. I don't want this to be forgotten. And
Yeah,
I worry with the time that passes that it'll just be, people people
yeah,
forget the
yeah,
what we've lost, you
yeah,
know.
and how with everything else going on
Mhm.
and the politics of everything and the
Mhm.
wide viewpoints that go from one end to the other. And, we have no idea what's going to happen. And
Right.
2 or 3 years from now, I think 2 or 3 years from now, there's still going to be people dying
Yeah.
of COVID. And I
Yeah.
still think we're going to be adding names to a memorial. And I don't want, yeah, I'm the same as you. I don't
Yeah.
want people to forget w- this time and forget all these people
Right. Right.
who,
Who all should be here still.
right.
I mean, even it's for me, I try to take, because the politics of it get me so upset. So I just look at it from like a humanity level. They should all be here,
Mhm.
regardless of how you look at it. They all deserved to live. They were important people who made contributions to this world, to their families, and they should all be here. And because there's not, we can't forget that. We can't forget that they were important to somebody, to some place, to some community.
Yeah.
And for my dad, my dad served in the military. I mean, he made a difference in this world. And so you can't just brush those people aside like they were nothing. And sometimes I feel that that's what's happening, and so it kind of goes back to like when people ask about him, and I love that because it gets me a chance to like talk about him, and he's not a number. He's somebody who really made a difference, not just for his 4 kids and his wife and his grandkids, but for his community and for America and
Yeah.
all of that. So
Wow.
I hope that there will be a national day of mourning or something to that
I do
effect.
too.
Um,
I do
yeah.
too. I think a national day of mourning, I think a national, some sort of national memorial
Yes.
that is permanent down the road. I haven't been
Yes.
to the 9/11 memorial, but I envision something like that. But it's
Hmm.
going to have to be so big.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
Did
And
you
there,
did this speaking of 9/11, I don't know why last year I was in the throes of chaos of COVID, but I actually watched the coverage this year. Oh, it was because it was the anniversary or whatever. But I noticed just watching it, maybe you feel the same way. I just looked at it so different than I
Mhm.
ever had
Yeah,
because of losing my dad. I mean, I looked at all they were interviewing, well, they're now adults, but kids who had lost parents, and you sat there and you're like, oh my God, like they were 5 years old or 3 years old, and now they're grown adults. I mean, like I thought, how the hell did they pick themselves up and, you know, and and become who they are? I mean, it was
yeah,
astounding to me. And of course, I'm sitting there crying, and I don't remember, I remember being sad watching that stuff in prior years, but no, this was different. It was like
yeah,
I totally understood the grief.
yeah,
That your life could literally change in an instant.
yeah. Yeah, I think about that. I've been to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington,
Mhm.
D.C. many times, and I think about that one differently now too.
Yeah.
I visited that memorial as a teenager for a woman in the small town in Montana I grew up in. She'd never been there, and her son was on the wall. And so I went there for her because, that it was just, she was a lady in my neighborhood that I knew. And
Yeah.
I had my hand right by her son's name and I left a little message and a flower because that's what she asked me to do. And
Mhm.
God, I think about that now and it just gets me all emotional
I know.
because, someday my grandkids are going to go see my
Right.
mom's name.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, and that's exactly how I feel about it. And even now, it's like if with my kids, it's like something will happen, or and I'll tear up, and my older daughter says, "You miss grandpa, don't you?" And it's like,
Mm,
and you're like, ugh,
yeah,
it's so difficult navigating all of this right now. I
it
don't
is.
know if it would be any easier under different circumstances. I'd like to believe it would be.
Yeah.
My my good friend who lost her dad to cancer a few months before I lost my dad said to me, I said to her after my dad died, I said, "Is it always going to hurt this much?" Because it was just that acute pain. And she said, "Jill, I can't tell you because I lost my dad in a totally different way, and I got to sit with him for 2 years or whatever it was and enjoy those last few years and tell him exactly what I needed to say, and you listen to him tell me what he wanted to say. You didn't have
Mhm.
that." So, I just we have to be kind to one another,
Yeah.
especially during these times,
Yeah.
given all that we've been through.
Yeah, we definitely do. Walk around and you can see it in people's eyes
Yep.
that life is different. It's
Mhm.
not ever going to be the way it was.
Right.
And there is maybe down the road somewhere going to be a new normal, and for a lot of people who have never had COVID in their circle or
Mhm.
their family, their new normal is going to be different. Ours, it's
Right.
just never going to be normal again.
It will never be the same. You just create
Yeah.
an I guess you create a new life, you
Right.
know? You do what you can to I always to honor,
Mhm.
the ones we've lost. I know my dad, like, when I get sad, I'm like, "Dad would be so mad at me right now," And so then I have to pick myself up and, like, you can't get so I let myself cry, but then I pick myself up and, like, do what he would wanna do, and
Yeah.
and I don't know about you, I'm pretty proud of how I've done it. It's doesn't
Mhm.
not every day is easy, but I feel like I am honoring him. I feel like I'm doing what he would want me to do and getting through this very difficult time under very, very difficult circumstances. The
Yeah.
cards are stacked against us. If I can get through this, I feel like, gosh, like what else?
Yeah.
I feel like other things will be a lot easier. If I can deal with losing my father to COVID during COVID, which is still going on. you
Mhm.
know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I just hope that back to being kind and stuff. It's like what losing him has made me realize it's like we don't know what, every day you come into contact with people and you have no idea what they're dealing with.
Mhm.
And it's just like definitely become more aware of that and patient with that. It's like we're all carrying some heaviness or weight, and we have to honor that in other people. And
Yeah.
I think that was lost a lot last year under, different,
Mhm.
politics and all that. And hopefully we're getting back to a better time of respecting each other. I hope
Yeah.
that for our future.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's definitely what we need.
Yes. Yeah,
Well, thank you for talking to me and telling your dad's story.
of
I
course.
appreciate
So
it.
nice to talk to you and hear your mom's story. It does help, doesn't
It
it, to
does.
hear other
Oh,
people's stories? Yeah.
it really, really does, and it's surprising every single time I do this because I talk to people on the phone ahead of time. I talk to
Mm,
you ahead of time, and I never come away feeling worse or heavier or
mm,
more griefy.
mhm.
Griefy, that's a word I made up.
That is.
I come away feeling less alone.
Right.
And
Right.
that's the beautiful part of this for me is every story's a little different and everybody's take on it is a little different, but I always come away from it feeling less alone, and I hope that that's how you feel too today,
Yeah.
telling your dad's story.
I do. I do. I always love talking about my dad.
Mhm.
I will continue that every day for as long as I'm here
Yeah,
because he deserves that.
yeah,
And our family deserves that for people to know
yeah,
about him.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. If you like this episode, please share the show. Share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, rate and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And then go rate it on Apple Podcast, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this podcast finds new listeners. So please, share the show. Until next time.